Hey there, how are you feeling so far? We're nearing the end of this course, and honestly, you've done a great job. Previously, we talked about the life cycle of a project, the task breakdown of phases, and some different methodologies you can use as a project manager to help ensure your project success. You also heard from my colleagues about some of the ways we manage projects at Google. Here, you'll learn about organizational structure and culture, and how they impact the way you set up and execute your project. I'll describe some common types of structures that you're likely to encounter during your project management career. You'll also learn about change management, which refers to the way you present the final project to the organization and get them to accept and implement your project outcome. These are important elements to ensure that your project is adopted and lives on. Are you ready? Let's get into these concepts. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk about the concept of organizational structure and the project manager's role within a given structure. Keep in mind that your role won't be the same for every team or organization because many companies are structured differently. But this overview will serve as a foundation for wherever you work. So, what is organizational structure? Organizational structure refers to the way a company or organization is arranged or structured. This structure also tells you how job tasks are divided and coordinated, and how all the different members of the organization relate to one another. In other words, organizational structure gives you a sense of who reports to who. But organizational structure is much more than that. Understanding the different types of organizational structures can serve as a map to help you determine where you fit in, who you should communicate with, and how frequently to communicate with them. Now that we have a basic overview of the definition of organizational structure, let's look at the various organizational hierarchies that you may encounter at work. An organization's structure is most commonly mapped out using a reporting chart or org chart, which is short for organizational chart. Reporting charts show the relationship between people and groups within the organization and details who each person or group reports to. There are a few different types of organizational structures, but for this course, we're going to focus on two of the more popular ones, classic and matrix. Let's start with classic. The classic grouping includes what are usually called functional or top-down structures. The classic grouping follows a typical chain of command, where the chief executive officer, also known as CEO, and other executives are at the top, followed by directors or managers, then their direct reports, and so on. Each of these directors or managers typically oversee teams within their function of the organization, like marketing, sales, or human resources. You can see this type of structure in effect by looking at a branch of the military. Take the Army, for example. You may enter the Army as a private and report up to a sergeant, who oversees multiple people in your squad. And that sergeant ultimately reports up to a lieutenant, and so on. If your organization works in this structure, as the project manager, you might communicate regularly with your manager, the person directly above you, and also with your peers who work on the same types of projects as you. But it isn't always a straightforward top-down approach. There are other factors at play that make organizational structures a bit more complicated than we can see on paper. For instance, you may have project teams that sit across different functions. This is common in many companies, Google included, and is usually referred to as the matrix structure. You might think of a matrix structure as a grid, where you still have people above you, but you also have people in adjacent departments who expect to hear updates on your work progress. These people may not be your direct bosses, but you are responsible for communicating with them, since they may inform changes to your work. For example, at Google, we have the major functions of marketing, sales, and more, with a traditional reporting chain. But we also have programs for our products, like Google Search, where project teams consist of program managers, engineers, user experience or UX designers, and so on. And each team member reports to their own management chains. Another example is my organization. It's called Global Affairs. I have a direct manager who oversees the work I do in my core role, and who is responsible for delivering my performance reviews. But Because I work with multiple people across other teams and specialties, I often get asked to manage projects where I'm informally working with lead program managers in other organizations. Similar to my own manager, I provide updates to that program manager, seek their approval, and solicit feedback on our partnership and progress. So to recap, the classic structure follows a traditional top-down system of reporting, and the matrix structure has direct higher-ups to report to and stakeholders from other departments or programs. Knowing which kind of organizational structure you're working in plays a major role in how you prepare for and carry out your project, or even in an interview. During an interview, you can ask about the type of organizational structure the company uses and where your role will fit in. This will help you and the interviewer communicate clearly about the people you will engage with daily and the expectations for the role. In the next course, you'll hear from a Googler about a third type of structure, project management office, which you might see in some of the organizations where you work or interview. Enjoy. Hey again, ready to keep going? The previous videos explained that knowing what kind of organizational structure you're working in plays a major role in how you prepare for and carry out your project. An organization's structure provides the framework for accountability and communication. As the project manager, it's vital that you understand who you're reporting to on each project, and just as importantly, who the members of your team report to. Knowing the organizational structure also tells you how and where to get the resources you'll need so you can get the project done efficiently. When you understand the organization's structure, you'll be able to identify how it impacts the way you manage the project. One way organizational structure can impact the way you manage a project is by the amount of authority given to the project manager. Authority has to do with your ability to make decisions for the project that impact the organization. In some cases, you might have the authority to do things like select the vendors who provide services or goods for the project. Other times, you might have a set of vendors selected for you. Your level of authority and responsibility will vary from project to project. Another way organizational structures can impact project management is through resource availability. Managing a project is a lot easier when you know how to access the people, equipment, and budget that you need. Let's explore how different structures can affect the way you manage a project. In a classic structure, you might find yourself with less authority and a tighter scope. You may need to rely on getting approval from the appropriate managers, directors, and department heads in order to move forward and complete certain tasks. In this case, it's likely that these people are in charge of the people on your team and the resources you need. As a project manager, working in a classic structure, you may depend on the managers in your organization to approve resources. In other words, the amount of people working on your project or the budget that you have allocated to your project is decided by the leaders of your department or function. In a classic structure, you may have to go through a chain of approvals and advocate for more resources if you need them. For example, if you need a budget increase, you would report this to your manager. Then your manager might escalate this up to their management chain to get approval. That's the classic structure, a traditional top-down arrangement of employees and authority. Now, let's explore the matrix structure. The main difference with a matrix structure is that employees often have 2 or more managers or leaders they'll need to work with and update. Your team members will have their functional manager and you, the project manager. If members are working on multiple projects, they may have even more managers. This can affect your authority as a project manager, as you will need to cooperate with more than one leader in the organization. You may need to share resources and negotiate priorities. The key is to make sure you know who your stakeholders are and who controls what, since the chain of command isn't always as clearly defined as in the classic structure. Because there isn't always a clear chain of command in a matrix structure, you need to make sure you have identified and communicated with anyone you might need to report to and get approval from well before the project begins. Once this is established, though, your project within a matrix structure should be able to run efficiently. Matrix structures emphasize a strong project focus from the team and the organization, so you as the project manager generally have more autonomy to make decisions and gather resources as needed. As I hope you've noticed, the way an organization is structured can have a big impact on the planning and execution of your project. Understanding all of this will help you run and manage a project much more efficiently. Next, I'll tell you about organizational culture, another factor that impacts how you manage your project. Catch you in a bit.
Hi, I'm Lon. I'm a director of program management at Google. A program management director has a team of project managers to help execute and bring products to our users. I work on the project management team, or the PMO team, for a group called Geo. And in Geo, we bring geospatial products to our users, things like Google Maps and Google Earth. And the team that I'm a part of actually works on all of the data and imagery that powers all of those products. A project management office is a team of project managers. We are a group that coordinates all of the different parts of a project together, including folks who work on our product, engineers, and many business functions, and we help bring all of those ideas to life. My role specifically in working in a PMO is ensuring that we're connecting all of the different parts that are associated with projects to ensure that they're all connected together. Sometimes we find out when projects are happening, there's a piece of it here and a piece of it there, and they may not even know about each other. One of the most critical things that project managers get to do is they get to have a bird's eye view of everything that's happening in a project. So that's a lot of my role, and what I'm working on with my team is ensuring that all of the pieces that need to connect together actually do connect together. I've had many different roles inside of many different PMOs inside my career, all the way from taking just a piece of a part of a project when I was really early in my career, and then expanded that into taking a full end-to-end project, which were smaller, and then building up my career and then moving into really large, complex projects. And at each stage of these, I had loved every piece of it. So even from the time that I had only a part of a project, I got to go really deep inside of some of those technologies and have really deep and meaningful relationships with the teams that I have been working with. And that's not always possible when you're working on a really large project that has hundreds of people. You won't be able to develop deep relationships across that large group. On the flip side, when you're working on a large, complex project, you get to see all of the different gears turning inside of a large ecosystem of things that are happening. But that took a long time in my career to build up. But at each phase of it, I realized I was learning a little bit more, and I was learning how to work a little bit more broadly and think a little bit more differently, but really ensuring how do you continue to keep the execution and rigor of a project to ensure that ideas were coming to life. One of the biggest benefits I see in working in a PMO is that you get to share a lot of best practices with each other. One of the downsides, I think, for project management is typically we don't get to work with each other because we're working with a lot of client teams and we're working with other disciplines. But a huge benefit in working in a PMO is that you get to connect with other project managers where you can share your challenges and see how somebody else had gotten through it. Or you can share templates or tools that you may take time to develop on your own, but somebody else already has handy, so you can borrow their tool for your own use. But the best part is you have a community of people who think the same way about problems in a very methodical, in a very task-oriented, in a very action-oriented and goal-oriented way, which is not typically true if you're working across all other disciplines all the time.